arguing with somebody. I was doing a text argument before I came up here. Just got to respond to what they wrote. You're a moron. Exclamation mark. Send. Okay, good. So Florida's not going well for me. First of all, I got here a couple days ago, and I'm a big Diet Sprite guy. They don't have that in the hotel, so I've been walking back and forth to the gas station to get Diet Sprite. And then I was sitting in my room this morning, and I realized that that big thing holding up my television wasn't an armoire, it was a refrigerator. I could have bought them all at once, so that wasn't good. Then I realized I'm down here, look at all these young, beautiful people. You're thin, you're fit, you're these things. All of Florida people look so nice. I realized that Florida makes me look fat. So I'm extremely self-conscious about that. Then I get to follow Joe Walsh. How cool is that? My buddy, my friend, Joe Walsh. And you know what Joe said to me when he came backstage? He fired me. You know, you guys are out here screaming, wine and spirit. Joe comes back and says, all right, buddy, go educate him. Okay, thanks, Joe. I'll try to educate him. I don't know if you heard this. Bill O'Reilly's next book is called Killing Hamachek. And it is the story about how Joe Walsh systematically destroyed me over a long period of time by speaking before me at turning point conferences. I don't have a chance. And he looks like George Clooney, right? That's not fair. Here I am. So I had somebody, I was close. I had somebody say to me once, you remind me of somebody on TV. And I said, really, who? And they said, do you remember the old TV show, My Friend Flicka? And I said, yeah, the one with the kid and the horse that was on when I was a kid. And they said, yeah. And they said, remember the horse? And I said, yeah. And they said, just keeps getting worse. So then I tell my older kids, I'm speaking at Turning Point. They said, Dad, do you realize you have your own hashtag? And I thought, great, I have a skin lesion that'll make me high. Then they explained to me about Twitter. So now here's the thing. So I'm going to try to be persuasive because I'm supposed to teach you how to argue effectively. So apparently sometimes when I talk, you guys go on Twitter and say things. Here's what I want you to do. If you tweet anything, you want to say, Brent Hamachek speaking in West Palm Beach, wearing a Rush Limbaugh tie. Because I'm convinced that if Rush knows I'm here wearing his tie, I'm going to get invited over before I have to fly back. So we'll give that a try and see if it works. We're going to talk about how to argue effectively today. And Charlie wanted me to make sure I told you that this is going to help you the rest of your life, whether you're in person or whether you're doing it digitally or any other way. Again, more pressure. So not bad enough that I'm following Joe. Now I've also got to try to change the rest of your lives. Let's see if we can do that. Do me a favor. Ask me who I'm voting for president. It's none of your business. I'm not going to tell you. Thank you for asking, though. It's fine. But I can tell you something that's kind of interesting. In the world in which I live, there are a bunch of folks that I know who are now really strongly thinking about voting for the person that I'm planning on voting for. And I won't say that I'm responsible for it, but I will say this, I'm partly responsible for it because they are coming to me and they're saying something that's very interesting. They're saying, you know, I've been thinking about that conversation we had, and I've been watching what's going on, and I think I might be coming around to your point of view. Now what's interesting is they say they think about the conversation that we had, not what I said. And that's a big difference. Because we all sort of think of, who likes to argue in this room? Like to argue? Okay. What's the best thing about arguing? Winning. What else? What else? What do you like? Being right.
Frustrating the other person.
Frustrating the other person. Oh, this is good. This is good. What's the best thing about arguing?
Them agreeing with you at the end.
Them agreeing with you at the end. I like this guy, and you're not wearing a tie, I can make fun of or anything. Oh, wait, that's Joe's routine. I did my own tie jokes. That's a pretty good reason to like arguing, is to be able to come out on top at the end. Oh, by the way, did I mention I've been having a tough time in Florida? So the screen's over here. I never really thought about that when I gave my slide presentation, and it's over here too. So I'm going to be doing a lot of this and that. I can do a Joe Walsh imitation. Jump up and down. We're going to talk today, though, cover this briefly, how to argue effectively. And my definition of arguing effectively, it means that sooner or later, you get the person with whom you're engaged to look at things the same way you do. Why are all of you doing any of this if every single thing you accomplish is about agreeing with every single person that's in this room right now? That would be a colossal waste of time, although Palm Beach is nice. It's got to be about getting more people who aren't in this room right now, who don't agree with your perspective of the world, to agree with you. That's what it's got to be about. Now, I have a pointer. This is fun. They didn't tell me where to point it. Let's see if that works. It doesn't. It did. All right. Here's the thing about arguing. Arguing is really a cousin to selling, which is a big part of what I do for a living. Because when you're arguing with somebody, you're trying to get them to buy your idea, okay? That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to close a sale. In this case, it's not a used car, it's not a new app, it's your idea. It's what you want them to believe, okay? And the very first thing you've got to do when you're arguing is figure out, who am I selling to at the moment? Who's my audience? Now, there's different ways to argue, right? There's the way to argue where you know that you're in front of a room and you're going to try to persuade an audience that's before you. I guess that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to try to persuade you that some of this stuff works. There's also the way where we know everything lives on the media these days with YouTube and other apps where you might be arguing to an audience not yet present, an audience that's down the road. Now, depending upon what you're doing, you've got to change your style of presentation, how you communicate, what you say, whether or not you're wearing a Rush Limbaugh tie, that sort of thing. But what we're going to talk about today, what we're going to focus on, is arguing, selling to other individuals, one-on-one, okay? Because to really change opinions and make it stick, that's the most effective way to do it. It's also the most costly way to do it. But here's something I want you to think about while we go through this. When you're with a group of really good friends, and you always agree on everything, all of you can experience this. Have you ever been with a group of friends, you always agree on everything, but you recently changed your mind about something? That ever happened to anybody? You recently changed your mind? Okay, so you're with the group and you say, I thought about this and I have a new opinion. Your friends treat that differently than if you're engaged with a stranger on a college campus. They'll say, what, are you crazy? And you say, no, I'm not crazy. You're a moron. You've got to listen to this. This is the right way to do it. You can actually sort of just fight with them. And you can start to get them to think differently. Because they're your friends. They receive you better. I tell you this because if you learn how to convert people to your position who aren't your close friends, they have close friends. And they will become like good old-fashioned KGB moles. If you don't get the reference, Google it. I'm old. I use stuff from the Cold War. My friend Flicka. I'm all over the place. All right? But that's just a function of age. Send them back out into the world with your message, and they'll convert more people for you. Okay? Let's see if this works. I still don't know where I'm pointing it. You help? Here we go. All right. So, the goal of selling is conversion. Conversion has to be voluntary. Las Casas taught us that hundreds of years ago. All right? In order to get that conversion to be voluntary, you have to create awareness inside of the person with whom you're arguing. And the best way to create that awareness with someone else is to have them hear in their own words the argument that you're trying to make. In other words, you need to get them to say out loud what it is you're trying to say. Here's a victory in every argument. Absolute victory for you. If you're engaged with somebody in a discussion, and if at the end of the discussion they suddenly say, I never thought of that. If they do that, you just won. That's what you're looking for in every engagement that you have. I never thought of that. Because when they say it, you just change their thought process, and they are not going to be able to change it back. All right, how do you make them hear their own words? You make them answer questions. Arguing is not about what you say. It's about what you get them to say on their own. Only by asking them questions are you going to be able to do that. But the questions aren't random. You're going to walk them through a progression. All right, there's a process that we'll talk about in order to get the person to where it is you want to go. Remember that when you're engaged in an argument with somebody else, it's your show. It's your sale. Don't lose control of it. Own it. Control it. Manage the conversation, because you're the one with an outcome in mind. They just want to yell and scream at you and try to be right. Okay, common mistakes in arguing. People needing to hear themselves being brilliant. It's a big one. You know, you're so wrong about this. Let me tell you something. I've studied this for many, many years, and I'm very, very smart. And, in fact, I'd like to tell you how smart I am, but I'm so smart I actually don't know where to start. So I'll get back to that later, but trust me, I'm really smart and brilliant, and you need to listen to me. People do this all the time. I'm almost not paraphrasing. People talk that way. Some of you in this room, you know you've heard yourselves talk that way. When you get in someone's face and you try to tell them just how much you know, you're losing them. You lose them before you ever even start. The next big thing that you do that's wrong is you start thinking about what you're going to say while they're still in the middle of talking to you. How are you going to appropriately address their comment? Ask them the next right question if you're not even paying attention. Remember, arguing is a cousin to selling, and selling is all about listening to what's coming out of your customer. When you're arguing with somebody who disagrees with you politically, don't think of them as your enemy. Think of them as your customer. You're trying to sell them something. Listen to what they're saying to you while they're talking. Inside of that, you're going to have opportunities. Next thing, letting your pulse rate increase. If you say that one more time, so help me, you are such, you are just like all the rest of them. And you start to get mad. You can't do it. You know, I learned a number of years ago, I worked in an organization that was filled with ex-military people. A lot of them ex-special forces people. There were a couple of things I learned. I've never gone back to verify them, but they came from credible sources, so I presume them to be true. One of them is that when our special forces people go into battle and they're hooked up to monitors, a normal soldier, when the gunfire starts, pulse rate goes up, all the different reflexes kick in that we know about. Doesn't mean they don't do their job, they do, but they're agitated. But for some of these guys, the best of the best, when the gunfire starts, their pulse rate drops and they get scary calm. Because right now, they're about to do what they are trained to do, what they're ready to do, and they're real pros. You need to, when you're engaged in an argument with someone, you need to make sure that your pulse rate doesn't go up. Be a special forces guy. Drop your pulse rate. Stay calm. Next two go together. Don't get drawn into fallacious contentions. Don't get sidetracked on peripheral issues. This happens all the time. This is the arguer's version of squirrel. And we're just over here, and our opponent says something so wacky and off base, and we chase it. And the next thing you know, we're yelling and screaming because our pulse rate went up, and we're telling them we're really brilliant because we know all about this, and it is not what you were talking about in the first place. Don't do it, all right? Don't let that happen to you. All right, before you start, know your material. By the way, I know our time is short today. we'll make sure that you have access to this outline so that you got it as a reference, all right? Know your material. Please don't go in to an argument with somebody expecting that you're going to be able to pull it off just because you're really clever, really articulate, really pretty, or really handsome. You have got to know what you're talking about. You have to. Next, think ahead of time about what the objections are going to be. I have opponent, but I'm going to change this to customer. Think about what the objections of your customer are going to be ahead of time. Be ready to be able to take those objections and address them briefly and then get rid of them and stay on target with your questioning, because you're going to control this sales call. You're going to control this argument. You will not lose control of it. Finally, a fun one is create some nice, clever, compelling phrases that resonate, that have a shelf life, that you can pull out when you need them. I've got a bunch of those. And when I use them, whether it's in a business setting or when I'm in a persuasive setting, I have people say to me all the time, hey, what did you just say? Can I write that down? Where did you get that? It sounds really good. It sounds good because I've used it a bunch, I've tucked it away, and I know when to pull it out. It's really helpful. And by the way, none of them should be insulting. So wait, 2 minutes, we're only 15 in. Do I have the time wrong?
I have the time for questions.
Oh, question.
Yeah, after, there's time set apart for questions.
Oh, that's time for questions.
If you
Okay.
don't want to do questions, you can keep going for like another 10 minutes.
You can interrupt me and ask questions. We'll keep moving along. Thanks. All right. Arguing is not Saturday night at the Improv. You can't just get up on stage and wing it like I'm doing right now. I mean, you can't do that. You've got to be prepared. If you're not going to take the time to do the preparation, sit back and listen to somebody else argue. Because otherwise, what you'll wind up doing is you'll wind up doing all the bad things that were on the last slide. Be prepared. Don't improvise. What just happened? Okay. All right. 3 key questions. And I think in the interest of time, I'm going to play with this a little differently than I was going to. There's 3 key questions you use at the beginning of every argument. No exceptions. You always do this. Number 1, tell me exactly what you believe. You want to have the person state their premise. You need to have them clearly tell you, because you would be astonished. You're not even aware of this. You've argued with people before. You've gotten into heated exchanges with people before, where if you had asked them up front, tell me exactly what you believe, you would have found out that either A, you mostly agreed on something, or B, you were having a completely wrong argument because you didn't ask them exactly what it was they believed. Tell me why you believe it. Trying to gauge knowledge versus emotion here. Right? Why do you believe this? Tell me why it's important to you. Okay? All right, so let me give you a real live example of this. Recently, and this is not we're not going to have an argument here, by the way, we're going to debate an issue. But recently I was talking to somebody about the Syrian refugee crisis. Everybody basically knows what's going on, right? At the gist of it. And this particular person, very much in favor of having the refugees come in. I have a different perspective on what we should be doing. So, as we started to get into this, and this is, this is a Jesus story, okay? By the way, when I grew up in a small town, and I was raised Protestant, became Catholic later in life, I'm convinced my dad's up in heaven trying to do the pre-work so that when I die, he's trying to make sure they'll let me in, right? I know he's up there worried about me. But I grew up in a little small town in northern Michigan, and we always had the Protestant TV preachers on in the morning. They were all from the South. So the first time I ever went to Sunday school, when they were 5 years old, and they said, so who are we here to talk about today? I said, we're here to talk about Jesus. Which didn't work because I was from northern Michigan. I was confused. But this was a Jesus conversation we got into, it turned out. I said, tell me exactly what you think we should be doing with the Syrian refugees. And the person said, I believe that we should be letting all of them in. And I said, okay, tell me why. She said, because that's what Jesus would have us do. That's what we should be doing. And I said, okay, why does this matter to you so much? Well, because my Christianity is extremely important to me, and I feel that that's what drives me in all my decisions. Okay, I got it. They want all of them to come in. They believe the reason that all of them should come in is because that's what Jesus would have us do. And I'm getting it because that's what drives this person's decision-making in all their considerations. Okay? So, go to the next one. I started to ask some questions about their knowledge and understanding of Scripture, other things. I was trying to get a gauge for the person with whom I was arguing. Okay? And finally, I wanted to change the subject, because that's what you always do, is change the subject. I wanted to take this person on a parallel path. And so what I did is I said, so tell me, in the Bible, what does Jesus say about the children? And of course, you're familiar, Jesus, the weakest among us, and whoever harms them is harming me, and that sort of thing. That's good. And so Jesus wants us to protect the children. Where in the Bible does it say that Jesus wants us to forsake our own families in order to love our neighbor and help our enemy? And they said, I don't know where that is. I said, that's okay, I don't think you'll find it. We can pull it out and look, but I don't think you'll find it. I said, so your position on taking in the refugees, where perhaps there could be harm done, is based on your Christian beliefs, but you also believe in the need to protect your family, and that's part of your Christian values. Could there be a conflict? Maybe there's more to this. And the person looked at me and said, I hadn't thought of that. And at that moment in time, I knew that I had an opportunity to now make a different argument. And it wasn't an argument that was about, ruthlessly leaving people in boats on the shore. It was an argument about prudent measures and steps to be taken to figure out how to do this right as it is. But by setting up and understanding exactly where they were coming from, to get their premise, to understand why they believed what they believed, to understand why it mattered to them, then to go through that questioning process, move to a different aspect of Christianity, and then make them collide, gave me an opportunity to be persuasive. And I got somebody to be willing to be converted to maybe a different sort of approach. Here's the worst part about the process I just described. It's the Tootsie Pop problem. There's an old commercial that you can look up on YouTube. Again, I use old references. I can't help it. I'm trying to watch Beyonce and stuff so I can get something contemporary. This is not working. So I'm going to go back to the Tootsie Pop commercial. This old famous commercial where they say, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? You know where the chocolate part is? And the animated character goes 1, 2, 3. Bites through the candy, then they're at the chocolate. The problem with arguing persuasively, with selling to your customer effectively, is that you can't bite through the candy. You can't get impatient. You've got to work through this process. You've got to take the time to understand their position, to take them through a questioning process, so that suddenly they have that moment where they say, what do they want to say? I never thought of that. When you hear them say, I never thought of that, you just won. That's victory. So, there's more I could go through on slides, but I'd love to see if we've got some questions, real life situations, problems, concerns. Yes, sir. You. Yes.
Okay, so a lot of times when we're arguing, sometimes we have to argue with professors or teachers, and most of them are more deeply ingrained in their beliefs and they're not as willing to change. But the students that are in the classroom may be willing to listen to a different point of view. Are these guidelines, does that work when we're looking at a third-person conversion?
Terrific question. Remember I said about know who the audience is you're arguing to or presenting to? It's a great question. When you're in a college classroom and you've got a tenured professor standing up in front like I am, who believes they know it all and they're quite powerful and quite wise, and will share with you all those things which you need to know, and they won't share anything else because you don't need to bother with it. You're not going to be able to patiently take that professor through a process to change their mind. Some people can't be won. But you're right. The kids in the classroom might be able to be won. So then, when Patrick Henry stood up and said, "Give me liberty," or "Give me death," he didn't turn to the crowd and say, "So, what would you like me to give you? And then I'll talk about what I could give you." He didn't do that. He made one of the most famous speeches of all time. It resonated for the ages. He was talking to everybody in the room to make a very important point that he hoped would stick. So, in that classroom setting, know your material. The rules don't change. Know your material. You've got to know your material. Keep your pulse rate down. I've watched, back when I was in college, I was guilty of it. You start talking to the professor and then another student says, and all of a sudden you're agitated and you say something reckless, it's not even smart, your logic is sloppy. Stay calm. Remember the message is on a phone because somebody's taking your video. It's happening, right? So be aware of that. Watch your language, watch your temper, and say something. Pull one of those phrases out. One of those phrases that you've rehearsed, that you know, that's compelling, that'll last through the ages. Like, you can't use "give me liberty" or "give me death" because it's already been used. But, is that helpful?
Yeah.
Good, yes.
Hi, I'm Tim from Houston, Texas.
Hi, Tim from Houston, Texas.
And I just want to preface this question by saying I completely agree with you on your Syrian refugee stance, but just to play devil's advocate, so given the fact that not even one of the millions of Syrian refugees that have come to Lebanon, Jordan, or even the United States have actually been confirmed to do this terrorist attack or whatever, and also the fact that these millions of Syrian refugees in these camps actually they're lacking water and stuff in Lebanon and Jordan. Like, why is it not the United States' moral responsibility, because we have the resources and the power to take in these Syrian refugees? Why should we not do that?
Okay. So I'm not going to evade your question, but because we're talking about argument instead about an issue, here's what I'll suggest. Inside of your question, which was very articulately delivered, okay, so you spoke well, you got to be careful because there are a couple of logic flaws inside of it. The presumption that because something may not have happened elsewhere yet, ergo, we needn't worry about it happening here, is dangerous, all right? So when you go to ask a question, and by the way, offline, I'm happy to talk to you about the whole mess and share ideas and thoughts. So when you're asking a question in a public forum, before you ask it, tie it up tight so that the person on the stage can't take what you just asked and deconstruct it in such a way as to perhaps actually flip the entire room against you, or to make your question look like it in fact wasn't a good one. I know what you're getting at, and you didn't ask it badly, and again, you were really articulate, but from the perspective of addressing an argument, think through the consistencies. Think through the logic and the completeness of what you're saying. Be careful. Every time you do it in a public setting, you open yourself up to be trapped. One last question. Yes?
So my question is, For a lot of us who work on campaigns, or a lot of us who have interactions with a bunch of people on the streets or whatnot, a lot of our interactions are quick.
Right.
And I know that sometimes it's nicer to have like conversations with friends where you have longer time to talk and kind of get at them. But in like our quick conversations with people, how do we win those? I mean, yeah, it does matter about what you're ready with, but kind of like some tips for that.
Really good question. So in a quick exchange, what can you do? First of all, having prepared those compelling phrases that work is a good idea. But I would, and one of the other things that Turning Point is brilliant at is creating messages that are sticky. So, big government sucks, the t-shirt I wore to the gym today, you know, big government sucks, we all know how that has stuck. So, using phrases quickly to get people's attention is a good thing to do. If you've only got a moment of their time, have a rehearsed, good line, and then provide them with direction of where they can go immediately to learn more. The other thing I would suggest is, if it's possible, do ask them a question. If you've got a Capitalism Cures booth out, and you're talking about capitalism being the social justice cure to poverty, and they come up and they say, capitalism just takes the wealth away from all the poor people and crushes them and makes the rich richer. If you could say to them, why do you think that? What is it specifically that makes you think that? If they'll tell you, they'll blurt it out, and when they do, you will have an opportunity, instead of just giving them a message, you can give them a message that relates to what they think. That's a better message. It's a little more specific. So make the best use of a short amount of time. Speaking of short amount of times, I'm out of time. I no longer have my room. I'm checked out. I'm really sad because I forgot all my soda in the refrigerator. It's a tragedy. But thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And thanks to Joe Walsh for leaving you here after he was done. So, thanks.